Hey, welcome back to the Amplified Podcast. It's good to have you with us. This is episode 9. We are well into Genesis. As always, I am your host, Jac Carnett. It's good to have you with us. I probably said that already, but we're going to have a good time today. So last week, we talked about Abraham and the covenant of circumcision, and we talked about Abram as being given a son, and we talked about Sarai and Hagar, and we've been kind of looking at Abraham's lineage. His name has officially been changed to Abraham, and Sarai's name has officially been changed to Sarah, so I can finally stop worrying about saying the wrong one. But we have Abraham and Sarah, who are now going to be God's people, separated from all the people around them, not only by how they act and God that they serve, but all the men are circumcised, and they were all circumcised in one day. And so this is a podcast to help you understand the Bible a little bit better. Maybe you've been in church for a very long time, and maybe you get lost in all the details. I'm finishing up the master's program at Oral Roberts University. I've been a pastor for a few years now. I'm a youth pastor in Oklahoma. I'm ordained through the Assemblies of God, and I love studying the Bible. And so I hope to bring some of what I learned to you, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube or wherever you're listening to this. Hopefully I can help you understand the Bible a little bit better so that we can understand the Lord better, understand ourselves better, and see how it all ties together. As we learned a few episodes ago, the Bible is so interconnected. There's actually, I think we said 66,000 hyperlinks within it that verses connect to each other all over throughout the entire Bible. It looks like this big archway. Actually, I have it right here. I'll show you. All these hyperlinks, all these lines are examples of different texts that are connected to one another, and it's there's a reason why this is the most studied book in the world. And so hopefully I can help you understand it a little bit better as we move forward. Now, I will say for today's episode, if I was ever going to have a parental guidance message, this would kind of be one of them that I would give. So we're going to get into what happens with Sodom and Gomorrah and kind of the evil that they were involved in. But we're going to find out what happens immediately after Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction that is, it's worse. And so if there is I'm not going to use any profanity, or I'll try to use, let's say, more adult medical terms to try to keep a straight face and try to speak so that anybody can listen to this and you'll be all right. But we're going to talk about some wild stuff for this episode. And so we are in Genesis 18. This is the birth of Isaac as promised. And we're going to see God visit Abraham. And we're going to see, I have some pictures of Sodom and Gomorrah as well. And we're going to get into it. So if you have your Bible, we are in chapter 18. We're, of course, reading out of the Amplified translation. And here we go. So verse 1 says this: Now the Lord appeared to Abraham by the terebinth trees of Mamre and Hebron, while he was sitting at the door, his tent door, in the heat of the day. When he raised his eyes and looked up, behold, 3 men were standing a little distance from him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. Now, at this point, Abraham is either 99 or 100 years old. We're talking about a 100-year-old man getting up and running toward these 3 men. We talked about before how God speaks to us in dreams often, but the primary way that God speaks to us now is through the Holy Spirit. It's a still small voice that you hear within yourself, not from yourself, but you hear God speak to you. But in this case, we're seeing a lot of instances where God is appearing to people in a physical form. We're going to see him eat here in just a second. This is what we call the theophany. This is theo, God, phany, meaning to appear, I believe. And so this is God appearing. to someone, and this is Jesus in true form. And so he runs as 100-year-old man because he recognizes the Lord. Hopefully we learn as Christians to recognize God's voice the way Abraham recognized what he looked like. Verse 3 says this, and Abraham said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass by your servant without stopping for a visit. Please let a little water be brought by one of my servants, and you may wash your feet and recline and rest comfortably under the tree. I will bring a piece of bread to refresh and sustain you. After that, you may go on, since you have come to your servant." And they replied, "Do as you have said." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly, get ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and bake cakes." Abraham also ran to the herd and brought a calf, tender and choice, and he gave it to the servant to butcher, and he hurried to prepare it. Now, as I'm reading this, I never thought about this, but Abraham says, let me bring you a piece of bread and let me bring you some water. But he goes above, even beyond what he promised to bring. He goes and gets a fatted calf, that's the best of his flock, and he slaughters it and cooks it for the Lord. And this is a perfect example of Abraham's personality to go above and beyond to serve the Lord. And so Abraham ran to the herd, brought a calf, tender and choice, and he gave it to the servant to butcher, and he hurried to prepare it. Then he took curds of milk and the calf, which he had prepared, and set it before the men. He stood aside and stood aside them under the tree while they ate. Then he said to them, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" Then they said to him, this is God and the 2 men with him, say, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "She's there in the tent." He said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." I think God asked him that because he wanted to make sure that everybody knows that Sarah can hear him right now, what he's about to say. And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. Verse 11, now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in years. She was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself when she heard the Lord's words, saying, "After I've become old, shall I have pleasure and delight, my Lord, being also old?" And the Lord asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh to herself, saying, 'Shall I really give birth to a child when I'm so old? Is anything too difficult or too wonderful for the Lord?' At that appointed time, when the season for her delivery comes, I will return, and you and Sarah will have a son." Then Sarah denied it, saying, I didn't laugh," because she was afraid. And he said, "No, but you did laugh. We all heard you laugh." Then the men got up from there and looked toward Sodom. So this is where the Bible makes a switch. And so to look at the genealogy once again of what's going on. So if you are listening, that's great, but I encourage you to watch online as well, because we're making annotations on the Bible on the screen as we're going along. So we have, sorry, I'm fixing my mic here. So we have Abraham, who's in the center here. Abraham. I'm going to switch back to white. Well, I'll just leave it. It doesn't matter. Abraham, we have... This is messing up. Give me just a second. Okay, I got it fixed. We have Abraham. We have Sarah. We have Hagar over here. Now, Abraham and Sarah and Abraham and Hagar each have their own kids. So Abraham and Hagar have Ishmael. Abraham and Sarah will have Isaac. And of course, we know that the line going from Adam all the way down to Jesus will follow through Abraham, Isaac, and Isaac, because Isaac is the promised child. I got AAC. Isaac? How do you spell Isaac? AAC. Yeah, I got it right. So that's what we're seeing. And we're seeing the Lord visit Abraham once again. I almost spelled it wrong again. Once again, and now the subject is switching toward Sodom and Gomorrah that are near where they live. So says this in verse 16. I want to go ahead and erase this because we're going to show some pictures here in a second, but that's the breakdown of the genealogies right now. We're still pretty early in the Abrahamic line. Then Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh. He said, but you did laugh. Then the men got up from there and looked toward Sodom. And Abraham walked with them to send them on the way. The Lord said, shall I keep secret from Abraham, my friend and servant, what I'm going to do? Since Abraham is destined to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations on the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen to acknowledge him as my own, so that he may teach and command his children, the sons of his household after him, to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is righteous and what is just, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has promised him. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily the Lord talking to himself, or if this is the Lord speaking to the Father, or maybe he's just speaking to the men who are with him. And the Lord said this, the outcry of the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. It says this in 21, I will go down now and see whether they have acted as vilely and wickedly as the outcry which has come to me indicates, and if not, I will know. So this is kind of like God wanting to come down and, God sees all things, he hears all things, but I think there's a part of him that is, there is a part of him that is the Father and the Son that wants to come down and really know for sure, even though he does, that the time for judgment has come, because this isn't going to be easy for the Lord to watch, his creation go through this destruction. And we'll talk about that in a second. It says in verse 22, now the two men, the angelic beings, turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham approached the Lord and said, will you really sweep away the righteous, those who do right, with the wicked and those who do evil? So he's kind of putting God to the test and say, if there are you really going to destroy everyone who's in the city? Even if there are righteous people in the city, are they going to meet the same fate as everyone else? And so Abraham says, suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. So we start with 50. 50 righteous people within the city. Will you really sweep it away and not spare it for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to strike the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. He's saying, I know that you wouldn't do that. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right by executing just and righteous judgment? So the Lord said, if I find within the city of Sodom 50 righteous people, then I will spare the entire place for their sake. Now, we're going to see that phrase come up a lot in Scripture. For the sake of so-and-so, my blessing continues. For the sake of the 50, I will spare Sodom. We're going to see in Kings a lot where God says, for the sake of my servant David, even though he's been dead 100 years, I will not bring this judgment upon Israel, whoever's, screwing things up at that point. But it's amazing how we see in Scripture, we see God say, I will I will remember the sins of man, even to the third and fourth generation, but I will remember the obedience of a man and the righteousness of a man, and I will bless him even to the 1,000th generation. So God is often willing to spare people, to be patient, to be merciful, because of someone that was willing to be obedient even hundreds of years before. So you right now may be reaping the benefits and blessings of a family member that was a Christian or that loved the Lord or was obedient 300 years ago, 400 years ago. And you, if you accept Jesus today, can start to set up those blessings for your own family. And what will be remembered of the negative will be far and away overwhelmed by God remembering the good that you've done. And so, for the sake of the 50, I will not destroy Sodom. That's what God's saying. Verse 27, now Abraham's thinking, okay, he took that. Now behold, I'm just dust. Okay, I understand my place ashes, and I've decided to speak to the Lord. If 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking, will you destroy the entire city for the lack of 5? So he's saying, what about 45? 45 righteous people. And he said, if I find at least 45 righteous people there, I will not destroy it. That's God talking. Okay, so we've got check mark 45. Okay. Abraham spoke to him again and said, suppose there are only 40 righteous found there. And God said, for the sake of the 40 who are righteous. So God's saying, okay, yeah, if I find 40 people there who are righteous. And Abraham said to him, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I will speak. And he's saying, listen, I know I'm pushing it here, but suppose 30 righteous are found in the city. Like, he knows how bad Sodom and Gomorrah are. He's saying, well, what if it's just 30 are not found there? And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, now behold, I've decided to speak with the Lord again. Suppose there are only 20 righteous people found there. Lord said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. So now we're down to 20. We worked from 50 all the way down to 20. Then Abraham said, oh, may the Lord not be angry with me, and I will speak only this one more time. Suppose there are only 10 righteous people are found there. 10. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. As soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, the Lord departed. Abraham returned to his own place. Now here's why we're studying this. There were no righteous people left in Sodom and Gomorrah. We're talking about a city that was much like the whole world before the flood, except for Noah and his family. There were no righteous people left. And we know that Lot and his family are there, but we're going to quickly find out that Lot is not a righteous man anymore. And so, we like to assume wrongly that God brings judgments preemptively, or that God brings it too soon. But God waited until he was merciful enough to wait until there were 0 righteous people left. Because I think if there was even one, God wouldn't have destroyed it for the sake of the one. But Lot wasn't righteous anymore. And so God was willing to go from 50 all the way down to 10, because I think he knew that there were no righteous people left. It didn't matter how many numbers they went through. And we're about to find out truly how wicked things were, and more wicked than just Vegas, more wicked than just, mafia and mobsters and racketeering. We're going to find out it's much worse. And so 0 righteous people are left in Sodom and Gomorrah. And actually, I think when we study it out, it's actually all 5 cities of this valley that we studied a couple chapters ago are all destroyed. So it's not just Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the 5 kings and their cities that challenged Kedorlaomer of Elam. They were, see if we can find it, in the Jordan Valley, made war with Bera, king of Sodom. So Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shenob, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And so, actually it's 4, because we're going to find out that they spare Zoar, because that's where Lot's going to run to. But it says this, chapter 19, this is kind of where the parental guidance comes in for it. It was evening when the 2 angels came to Sodom. Lot was sitting at the Sodom city gates. Seeing them, Lot got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. Now, how did Lot know from a distance that these men were angels? I truly believe it's because angels were living in this city, but they were fallen angels. They were enemies of the Lord, those that had followed after the serpent in the fall, in the revolt of heaven, and were cast out of heaven. That's how he recognized them as angels, because they were doing wicked things in this city, and these 2 angels show up. And so if you've seen an angel before, you know what it looks, you know what they look like. And he said, this is Lot speaking, "See here, my lords, please turn aside and come into your servant's house. Come to my house with me. Spend the night and wash your feet, that you may get up early and go on your way." Lot knows well enough. He's not a righteous man anymore, but he knows well enough that if they stay here, it's not going to go well for them. And it says, they said, "No, we shall spend our night in the open plaza of the city." And at the end of Judges, we see two more people try to do that. And another man comes along and says, "Yeah, y'all can't stay out here in the open. This is worse than South Chicago. This is worse than, Stockton, California. You cannot stay out here. This is worse than East St. Louis, North St. Louis. You cannot stay out here in the middle of the night. You've got to go inside." However, Lot strongly urged them, so that they turned aside and entered his house, and he prepared a feast for them with wine and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down to sleep, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house, all the men from every quarter. And they called out to Lot and said, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out so that we may know them intimately." So we're talking about men that not only recognize angels, but are familiar enough with them to know that not only do they have relations with these angels, but they want to have homosexual relations with these angels. And this is one of the key texts in why we see wickedness found in homosexuality. This is where it leads to. But Lot went out of the doorway to the men and shut the door after him and said, "Please, my brothers, do not do something so wicked. See here, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man intimately. I have 2 virgin daughters. Please let me bring them out to you instead, so that you can do as you please with them. Only do nothing to these men, because they are in fact come under the shelter of my roof for protection." This is a key example of Lot's not a righteous man. He was willing to give up his 2 virgin daughters so that they wouldn't abuse these 2 angels. Now, not that the angels needed protection, but the fact that this was even an option tells me of the lack of righteousness that was not only left in the city, but left in this family. And we're going to see another point where Israel itself falls to this level of debauchery at the end of Judges. And it does not actually goes worse for them at the end of Judges than it does here. But they said, "Get out of the way." And they said, "This man Lot came as an outsider to live here temporarily, and now he's acting like a judge to us. Now we will treat you worse than your visitors." So they rushed forward and pressed violently against Lot and came close to breaking down the door of the house. So now they're saying, "Listen, we wanted to do things to the angels. Now we're going to do even worse thing to you, because you're judging us. You're judging us." And there's a series called The Chronicles of the Nephilim, written by Brian Gadawa. He's an incredibly smart man and knows 100 times more about this whole situation than I do. But kind of the thesis of one of the things that he talks about in those books is that they had twisted the definition of love to not mean the selfless sacrifice for one another, and the meaning of right separation, meaning that when you marry 2 people together, they are now separated from everyone else. They are saying no to everyone else. They had stretched it and flipped it on its head, this meaning of love, to such a degree that now you weren't loving me if you weren't letting me take your wife. You weren't loving me if you're not letting me do these things to the angelic visitors in your house. You're not loving me because you're judging us here. And in this story, he tells about this basically satanic cult that's basically the only type of relationship that wasn't allowed was that of a man and a wife who were, consecrated to each other and each other alone. That they had stretched love to mean absolutely everything but what it was intended. And I think we're seeing that here as well. He kind of talks about propaganda that may have been there in that time. And when you read the Chronicles of the Nephilim, it's the Bible in narrative form. If someone took the Bible and kind of had, took literary license and created backgrounds, but also that made sense and followed with scripture, that's what it's about. And this is one of the primary stories for it. So they rushed forward and pressed violently against Lot, so much so that they are going to break down the door. But the angels reached out with their hands and pulled Lot into the house and shut the door after him. They struck and punished the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness. And in Brian Godawa's book, it says it's like, I can't remember, but it's with a flash of light, almost like the brilliance of God, they allowed to emanate from these angels for just a moment because they had been in the presence of God, living in heaven. And just that flash from angels, not even from God, that had been in the presence of God, blinded these men. It's a pretty cool part of the story. But it says that from the young men to the old men, so that they were exhausted, they exhausted themselves trying to find the doorway. And the two men, angels, asked Lot, they're getting down to business. They're like, we're not staying here. It's going down tonight. Have you any others here in Sodom, a son-in-law and your sons, any daughters? Whomever you have in the city, you need to get them out of here. Take them out of this place. For we are destroying this place because the outcry for judgment against them has grown so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us here to destroy it and ruin it. So now you may be wondering, why is God sending judgment there, but maybe not sending judgment on places of high crime today? Well, first of all, this was a level of evil that is even far beyond, at least what I'm willing to believe, that we are wrapped up in today. We're talking about genetic manipulation. We're talking about angelic manipulation of genetics and, the intermingling of humans and angels to create giants, to create these demonic entities, these chimeras. This is the kind of stuff they were involved in, to the point where not only did they recognize angels, but they wanted to sleep with angels in a homosexual fashion. And they were involved in far more evil than we're even familiar with today. And that level of evil on behalf of those angels, on behalf of those men, is like a foreign body in your own body. When someone develops cancer, the merciful thing to do is not to try to conform the cancer into the rest of the body. You have to cut it out. And so that's what we're seeing in this case, is God's cutting out this cancer of evil that goes beyond even just homosexuality, but, angelic interference with the lives of humans and the genetics of humans that would have eventually spread to the whole world, as it did in Noah's day, down to just one family left. And so it was an act of mercy to destroy these cities so that level of debauchery, that level of corruption did not spread to the rest of the world. The second thing is, why don't we see judgment like that today? It's because Jesus came, and Jesus bore and took all the pain of judgment on himself. And so all the wrath of God has already been poured out. And it's been poured out as Jesus took our punishment for us. And so if we don't want to ever see any more judgment or punishment and go to hell, then we accept the sacrifice of Jesus. And it's far more than just, escaping hell, but it's a relationship with the God who created you and the God who loves you. But if we don't want to accept Jesus, we have the free will to do that as well. In that case, the judgment that Jesus took is not a substitute for us because we didn't receive it. And so then we will face the same judgment as Sodom and Gomorrah did. And so it says this in verse 14, moving on. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were betrothed and legally promised to marry his daughters, and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But to his sons-in-law, he appeared to be joking, so they didn't take him seriously. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Get up, take your wife, 2 daughters who are here and go, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city." But Lot hesitated and lingered. Lot's like not wanting to leave. He's attached to Sodom. He's trying to wait for his sons-in-law. And they're like, "It is time. Today is the day." Lot hesitated and lingered. The men took hold of his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his 2 daughters, because the Lord was merciful to him for Abraham's sake. Remember, there are no righteous people left in Sodom and Gomorrah. It is only for Abraham's sake, for the righteousness of Abraham, that these 4 are even being saved now. Was merciful to him for Abraham's sake, and they brought him out and left him outside the city with his family. When they brought him outside, one of the angels said, "Escape for your life. Run for your life. Do not look behind you or stop anywhere in the entire valley. Escape to the mountains of Moab, or you will be consumed and swept away." But Lot said to them, "Oh no, not that place, my lords. Please listen, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have magnified your loving kindness and mercy to me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, because the disaster will overtake me, and I will be killed." Now, we talked about this a couple episodes ago with the War of the Kings. What would have been waiting for him in the mountains that he was so afraid of? And it's possible that other giant clans would have been there that could have wiped him out. It's possible that, the other wicked kings he may have thought were in those mountains. Suffice it to say, he felt like he couldn't go there and be safe. And so here's his kind of his retort in verse 20. "Now look, this town in the distance is near enough for us to flee, and it is small with only a few people. Let me escape from there. Is it not small, so that my life will be saved?" And the angel said to him, "Behold, I grant this request to you. I will not destroy this town which you have spoken. Hurry and take refuge there, for I cannot do anything to punish Sodom until you arrive there." For this reason, the town was named Zoar, meaning few or small. The sun had risen over the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained down brimstone, flaming sulfur, and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of heaven. So out of heaven probably meant that we're talking about a meteorite, and we have evidence of a meteorite strike in that exact location where the Dead Sea is today, where the Jordan Valley was. And I have these pictures as well of what we've done a lot of investigating into this area. And so this is one of the pictures of possibly some of the remnants of Sodom or Gomorrah. We see, some rock walls that were built, but we're talking about less than 0.1% of the city being left. Pretty much everything's been wiped out and has been for, thousands of years. Let me show you one more picture and move this one out of the way. So this is some skeletal remains that were found near the Dead Sea that we believe were, victims of the, if you want to call them victims, but people who died in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. I think it's possible that this is another skeletal remains here. I think it was 2 different that they found, and some remnants of a wall up here. But suffice to say, it's been completely destroyed, and I think that the sulfur and the salt content of those meteorites and what the Lord sent down from heaven was so intense that's why we have the Dead Sea today. The Dead Sea is the lowest elevation on planet Earth. It is a desolate place that will remain desolate for the rest of human history. And we talk often about in the Bible where when God truly brings judgment on a land, on an area, God makes it so sometimes that he'll say, no one will ever inhabit this place again. And that's true for Sodom and Gomorrah. We literally, we dredge and we mine salt out of the Dead Sea because it's, we're talking about just massive amounts of salt and sulfur that are prevalent here, so that no one's ever going to live here again. I didn't mention it during the story of Noah, but I truly believe this as well. I was talking to my dad recently and I said, why, or let me restate. God made it so that when the flood came, the places where those people lived, God wanted to wipe them out because of their wickedness, so much so that people never settled there again, ever again. And so at that time, we believe that the earth would have been temperate all the way around, and that's why we find remnants of tropical things in Antarctica and in the Sahara. And I was asking my dad, I was like, where are the three largest places on earth where no person can ever inhabit and build a city again? And the three answers were the Sahara Desert, which is about the size of the United States, the ocean floor underneath the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian Ocean, Southern Oceans, Arctic Oceans, or in Antarctica itself. And where do we find remnants of old prehistoric cities? We find them in the Sahara, we find them underwater in the ocean, and we find them in Antarctica. Now, you can get into all the conspiracy theories of it, but there is literal evidence and pyramids and ziggurats and all kinds of artifacts that have been found all over the world in those three places. And God made sure that no one was ever going to inhabit those places again. It's possible that they were, it's more than possible, it's likely that they were involved in a level of sin that it not only tainted the people, but it tainted the land. And God wanted to make sure that never happened again. He didn't even want people to live there anymore. And so I think we're seeing the same thing here with Sodom and Gomorrah, where God's wiping it out to such a degree that no one's ever going to live there again. And it says this in verse 25. And he overthrew, demolished those cities and the entire valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and whatever grew on the ground. I saw this just recently that they have found possibly some pottery that's heated up. That pottery that's was possibly from Sodom and Gomorrah that would have been made out of clay and sand, but was turned to glass in some sort of heat. And they believe that this was through the meteorites and this sulfur and this rain down fire and brimstone on the earth, that the meteorites that were striking and hitting the cities were so hot that you have to heat up a clay pot. It's like one of those pots that they found to 2,000 degrees to turn it into glass. So we're talking about extreme, literally scorched earth. And so it says this, but Lot's wife from behind him foolishly and longingly looked back towards Sodom in an act of disobedience, and she became a pillar of salt. I don't really know the significance of a pillar of salt, but that's what happened. Verse 27, Abraham started out early the next morning to the place where he only a day before had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley of the Dead Sea, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a kiln, pottery furnaces. There you go. When God ravaged and destroyed the cities of the plain of Sodom, he remembered Abraham, and for that reason he sent Abraham's nephew Lot out of the midst of the destruction when he destroyed the cities in which Lot had lived for the sake of Abraham. We're going to see that pop up all over the Bible, that God's doing things for wicked people just for the sake of their righteous ancestors. And so it's a big theme for God. Now, as I said, this is the parental guidance episode of the Amplified podcast, probably one of a few that we're going to have. And we've seen it so far, but somehow it's actually going to get worse. Now, Lot went up from Zoar and lived in the mountain together with his two daughters, possibly the mountains that he said that he didn't want to go to. So don't really understand that reasoning. But either way, he's out of Zoar now, for he was afraid to stay any longer in Zoar Possibly it was abandoned. Possibly people saw, the sulfur raining down, and they ran away before they even arrived in Zoar. You're going to see the reasoning for that here in just a second. He and his daughters lived in a cave. Verse 31, the firstborn said to the younger, our father is aging, and there is not a man left on earth. We're talking about destruction to such a degree that Lot here, he's lost his wife, but he has daughter 1 and he has daughter 2. We're talking about destruction to such a degree that these women thought that everyone else on earth is dead. We're talking about explosions to such a degree that they thought we are the only ones left alive on earth. We are the only ones left alive on earth. And so they come to an even more horrible conclusion. There's not a man left on earth to be intimate with us in the customary way so that we may have children. Come, let us make our father drunk with wine, and we will lie with him so that we may preserve our family through our father. That means exactly what you think it means. So they gave their father wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she got up because he was completely intoxicated. So daughter 1 now and Lot lay together. She conceives. Then the next day the firstborn said to the younger, behold, I lay with our father last night. Let us make him drunk with wine tonight also, and then you may go in and lie with him as well, so that we may preserve our family through our father. So they gave their father wine that night also, and the younger got up and lay with him. And again, he did not know when she got up or lay down because he was completely intoxicated. Now we have Lot laying with his second daughter, and she conceives. Thus, both the daughters of Lot conceived by their father. The firstborn gave birth to a son, and she named him Moab, who becomes the father of the Moabites, who are enemies of Israel from here on out. The younger also gave birth to a son and named him Ben-Ami. Ben, the prefix meaning son of, Ami, son of my people. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. And obviously Moses is writing this hundreds of years later. And the Ammonites still exist. And they're still enemies of Israel. So we have daughter 1, daughter 2, laying with Lot, giving birth to Ben-Ami and Moab. Ammonites, Moabites come about. And so that is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. That is the end of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's pretty tough. There were no righteous people left. And we're seeing the only reason why they survived was because Abraham was a righteous man and God wanted to do it on behalf of Abraham. So, the Bible's not pretty. There are a lot of truly the most amazing things in the world are found in the Bible. But we're also going to read Psalms that are horrific in nature. We're going to read stories that are horrific in nature. And it just adds to the fact that this is a true story. Real life is messy. Real life includes wickedness. Real life includes rage and anger and sin and redemption and righteousness, and all of that is found in here. The Bible's not really, it's not gatekeeping the good and bad parts of history. It's what happened, so this is what's here. And so that's what we're reading in this book. And as we move into episode 10, we're going to be moving back into Abraham and Isaac in the land of Canaan, as well as Isaac being born, and the story of Hagar and Ishmael. But again, like I've said, this is a story of God's people. So we'll see the Moabites and the Ammonites pop up here and there, but most of all, we're going to follow Abraham. and his people. And so hopefully this has helped you to understand the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and kind of the reasoning behind it all and what actually went down. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to write in the comments, or we don't really have an email that you can write to, but please feel free to leave comments on Spotify or on YouTube. And of course, we want more people to hear about the Bible, more people to hear about this podcast and understand it better. So if you could like and subscribe to this page and make sure that you listen when the day these come out, so that the following will grow, so that more people can hear and learn about the Bible. And we're going to try to tell it with no holds barred. We're going to try to tell it exactly the way it's written. So, as always, I have been your host, Jac Carnett. We will see you next week on the Amplified Podcast. Goodbye, folks.